This is TWiT.
I didn't get to watch the Galaxy event. I saw some of the headlines. I did see that Samsung partnered with Google on their Gemini LLM for the phone.
Am I
actually
wrong?
putting it on the phone.
But didn't, maybe it wasn't last year, but in years past, hasn't Microsoft had a presence at these Galaxy events? I feel like they have.
I don't know. Was it a regular presence? I mean,
I feel like it was.
As recently as last week, we talked about their
partnership. And there's your phone,
right?
you know, the phone link thing. And
now there's a special thing if you have a Samsung Galaxy Book laptop and a Samsung phone and use phone link, you get additional features, right?
And another thing, in previous years, Samsung was loath to mention Google. In fact, I can remember a Samsung Galaxy event, they didn't mention Android. Like, it's our own
for years,
thing.
I was working on the theory that Samsung was trying to eliminate Google and Android from the equation, and that the way we would know they were finally there is when they release things like Samsung Maps.
Right.
And, because they have their own browser, their own email, their own messages, their own phone, So
something weird happened because all of a sudden they're in partnership.
Yeah.
Maybe Google's paying them $20 billion a year. What do you think?
Well, so when when Samsung did their smart home platform, they went that alone, right? That was their own thing. They didn't partner with Google and Google Home or whatever system.
They have Tizen, their own kind of anti-Android.
Although, but now they've got but they're
now
Wear 4.
No,
now they're back.
That's right.
They're back.
It's Wear. So I'm really wondering if Samsung and Google are having a rapprochement.
Are mending the fence.
In fact, I'll go even further, and I wonder if Google is kind of. I've never really understood why Google feels like it has to have a phone itself.
You need a reference phone.
Yeah,
and is it?
It's sort of
is it a reference phone? It used to be in the early days. It was.
Rationale for Surface I could make, which I can't because they don't actually do this, would be if they did that, right? Because they used to have this thing called Signature PC. Remember?
Google used their own processors.
Signature PC was like their version of Nexus, and then Surface is like their version of Pixel.
Killed it. Yeah.
So I do think there's a place in the world for, especially in an open ecosystem, right? Apple does their own thing, so that we can't count that. But on the other side of the fence, where Samsung is a great example of polluting this Android experience with their own stuff. Some of it's good. Most of it's terrible. There are apps you can't uninstall, right? They duplicate apps. It's a mess, right?
You and I both own Pixels because we want the signature.
And I like that experience. Yep,
yeah,
I really do. And
but I would hate Google. Google kills stuff.
I know. And they have never seen any level of success that makes them look like they're in the same market as the iPhone.
That's right.
This is the problem.
Or even close to Samsung.
The iPhone just surpassed Samsung for
globally,
smartphone sales in a year.
Yeah.
Samsung, the one thing you could always say was like, look, too much crap where they do their own UI, which is honestly pretty good. And they do their own services and they have their own ecosystem stuff. They get earbuds and blah, 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 whatever. They have all this stuff. Was like, but they sell so many of these things, right? So you kind of have to pay attention to it because they're so big, and they still are. But that the fact that they were just beaten by like a monoculture company is like got to be a little scary for both Google and Samsung, right?
Here's my scenario. Samsung is very much threatened by the Chinese companies. Huawei, Xiaomi, and some names you haven't heard of.
Transmissible. Apple is too, right? To some degree.
Yeah. These guys are coming.
Yeah.
And Samsung is more threatened than Apple by these guys. So that's on the one hand, the pressure on that hand. Yeah, they would like to be Apple.
Well, thank God for the United States blocking all the Chinese tech.
Yeah.
Right?
And then on the other hand, Google, I think, looks at the Pixel phone and says, we spent a lot of money to make this thing, and we don't make any money on it. It's a tiny business. We've got no mind share out of it. Maybe it's time to kill it.
Oh boy, that oppresses me so much. I'm not arguing the logic of it. It totally makes sense to me. As someone who loves Surface but also argues this thing doesn't make any sense.
I don't know why Microsoft keeps making Surface.
I know you could make the same argument for Pixel, and I hate that because I really do prefer that it's not people get this wrong all the time, like it's some kind of a clean, pure Android version. It's not. It's actually very heavily modified. This is not the thing they give to Samsung and then Samsung screws it up. Like they're building their own stuff on top of it. And honestly, it really meets the bar of their marketing where it's like the helpful phone that, it answers spam calls and turns them away. It does us awesome. It's awesome at all that stuff. And I worry every day that it's going to go away every day.
Yeah.
I really do. It's awful.
You're talking about no Copilot in the S24, but didn't literally last week you were talking about how the Book 4 had an exclusive version of Copilot?
Yes, the Copilot in Windows 11, like the
okay, but it's on. It was for the Samsung Galaxy Book 4.
If you had a Book 4, a high-end Samsung phone of whatever generation, and we're running, well, you would be running Windows 11. Yes, your Copilot experience has some additional features.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nothing on the S24.
But that's not no. I'm sorry.
In fact,
Samsung's
using Google's AI. They're using Gemini for everything, and that's I thought interesting.
I wrote that poorly. I'm sorry. What I meant was
Bixby's long gone, and now it's Gemini.
Let me rephrase. No, it's like no Copilot. Like in other words, like local, like SLM or whatever they're calling it. Like Google has. Samsung has partnered with Google for their Gemini. When they announced Gemini in early December, they announced that Pixel 8 Pro only would be the first phone to have this thing locally. Now, Samsung S24 Ultra, I don't know all of them, but at least Ultra, will have it as well.
The way they're using the NPU designation, Microsoft's NPU.
Interesting. Yeah. And because Qualcomm chips do not use that terminology.
Yeah. Samsung is using Exynos again, but not in the U.S. They're going to use Qualcomm.
Not in the US,
yeah. But Qualcomm
so they must have their own NPU or whatever they're calling it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And Qualcomm and Samsung and Google announced that they're going to have a joint sharing platform, that there won't be two, there'll be one.
So this was announced at CES. So this is Google used to have something called nearby sharing, and they're combining that with Quick Share from Samsung and calling it Quick Share, which is the Samsung name. Interesting. I was not happy with the nearby share name because Windows 11 has a nearly identically named feature and they're not compatible. And so
there's reasons.
It'd be nice if this were all, Apple, Samsung, Google,
the thing
Windows would all work
together. I think I said this as recently as last week. I feel like I've always long felt that there's a missed opportunity with Google and Microsoft for them to partner to meet this ecosystem threat from Apple. But now that you see what's happening with Samsung, you're like, okay, maybe that might even be the better company, right? I mean, they do make the best-selling Android phones by far. I bet Samsung. That's probably not true. I was going to say Samsung might be bigger than the rest of the market combined. That's not true.
I have to think that OpenAI and Samsung talked a lot about using ChatGPT.
Samsung is a big company. I'm sure they talk to everybody. Get the best deal they can. It's interesting
they chose Gemini. Yeah, maybe it's just about money.
It's probably because Google is more incented to get that deal than the other companies, right? Because there is regardless of what happens with Pixel, there is a fragmentation issue in Android that I think drives people away, and it's the yang, if you will, to Apple's yin of everything works together. One of the problems with Android and the broader systems.
One would argue this is the success of Android. The reason that the Android market as a collective is larger than the Apple market is because you have a whole bunch of vendors who get to do what they want.
So this is why the PC was successful for a long time as well. Yep. Same thing, right? I would buy like a Dell computer because they had this special feature or something, whatever it might be or whatever it was. But I don't know. There's something to be said. We keep talking about this. The thing that Apple has been able to succeed at that no one else seems to be able to succeed at. For all the awfulness as we see it from the outside, there's some benefit there.
And
it's always going to be second rate.
They are, but they do run the largest portion of the Android market. They're not as part of everybody else combined is larger than them, but they are the single largest.
So
Android
if you look at, I didn't put it in the notes, but if you look at smartphone sales from the last quarter and from last year, only IDC has weighed in, so it's just a single source. But Apple surpassed Samsung for the first time in history to be the biggest seller of smartphones in the world. It's they're close. 234 million iPhones in 2023 versus 226.6 for Samsung. But this has been true for a long time. The next three companies are Xiaomi, Oppo, and something called Transsion, which are all Chinese companies.
Right.
I've never even heard of that third one.
But most of these products only sell in China.
That's true. But the one thing, anyone who goes to Europe,
they just don't sell in the U.S. They sell everywhere in the world but the U.S.
Yeah, and in so when we go to Mexico, there are ads everywhere. All over the place for Huawei.
Yeah, Huawei.
Huawei phones, Huawei earbuds, Huawei. That stuff is still being sold elsewhere. So
right, there's the list.
Or at least, yeah.
All of them except Samsung and Apple are Chinese companies.
Right. They're all that's left. Notably, Google not on that list. Motorola not on that list. Yeah.
Google's in the others. They've just focused on the North American market.
But look at the far right column is the growth or diminution.
No, I can't tell from the tiny size. Are you looking at the year or the last quarter?
It's year to year, quarter over. It's year over year, quarter to quarter.
No, but it's the year number, not the. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So.
There's Apple's sales were up 3.7% for the year. Samsung's were down 13.6% for the year. Yikes. Yep. The last quarter went actually not too great.
Everybody was down except for Transsion, which is up 30%, whoever the hell they are.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some numbers like this for the PC industry in a little while, but this is always an interesting time of year because we get to look back and see how things went.
And IDC is pretty reliable in this, right?
They are, but I want to see Gartner and
right.
At least I usually try to average those guys because they do measure things a little differently. But yeah, it's probably true that I'm not saying that Apple did not surpass Samsung last year, and whatever. Apple had a blockbuster last year at a time when the market overall was not doing great.
Yeah.
Hey, it's me, Leo Laporte. I hope you've enjoyed this little snippet from Windows Weekly. If you want to see more and want to catch the whole show, you can subscribe in your favorite podcast client or visit our website, twit.tv/WW. And of course, there's links right below me.